Chapter 36. The retired Commodore walked ahead with the young Pete as Mr. Blue kept pace, working on his temporal wrist device. How does that work? Dawn was still confused. This was the 4th time she'd asked Mr. Blue how his time watch was operated. A sudden, deep trembling shuddered throughout the foyer they were in. The children nearly fell. Deep, dark crimson warning lights emitted ominous shadows everywhere, terrifying the kids.
"What the hell was that?"
Sully demanded. "We need to get to your room, children." Mr. Blue picked up Pete. The young man did not protest. "Right now, quick as you can. How much further to your room, Dawn?" "Room 8411, the Rothlanders. Right up there," she said. Mr. Blue stopped.
"What's your hold up, old man?"
Sully was hobbling his best down the hall.
"I'm ready to start doing hurdles."
"I know that name," the Time Lord muttered to himself.
"What?"
"Nothing." Mr. Blue snapped to attention and continued. "What year is this, Dawn?" 2367. "Your name is Dawn Rothlanders?" The Time Lord whispered to himself. He was squinting, adjusting his lapis tie, trying to remember something. "Yes." The young lady became impatient. "We have been over this, weirdo." She ran to the end of the hall. Far ahead, Sully shouted,
"Got it!"
and stared at the door. Above it, in Art Deco, old-fashioned brass numbers read 8411. Hanging above in a yellow hologram was the name Rothlanders. Dawn joined Sully and Pete by the door and imprinted her thumb on the knob. It clicked open as Mr. Blue caught up. All four entering the Rothlanders Deluxe Suite. There was another powerful rumble which lurched the Midpoint Hotel violently to the left. All the occupants slid to their knees or landed on their sides. Mr. Blue stood and immediately ran to the terminal on the other side of the room. With no immediate response, the impatient Time Lord shot it with a bright blue ray. What's going on?" Pete began to cry. Dawn gripped his head and held him close as another tremor shook the midpoint, tilting it to the right. "Shh!" The Time Lord held out a finger to his lips. "Shh!" He slid his arms out horizontally. "I think it's settled for a moment." How do you know?" "Believe it or not," Mr. Blue smiled, "I have a good read on how large structures behave under stress." Sully clearly didn't get the Time Lord's reference to purge.
"Young lad, that's a damn good question, traveler."
The retired Commodore's voice was raised.
"You look like you have a plan. Great. Don't I'll understand what it is. But do an old man a favor and at least tell me what the blazes is happening."
"Stranded without my vessel," Mr. Blue shouted, typing on the terminal.
"Right. Up to date on that. What else you got?"
"The midpoint is collapsing."
"Ah."
Sully finally lit a cigarette. "You shouldn't smoke," Pete advised.
"The midpoint is collapsing,"
Sully replied to the situation, more than to the young man, then asked,
"Why is the midpoint collapsing?"
Mr. Blue looked at him, strange alien eyes, wide and azure and bizarre. "Because it is being disassembled." He spun the monitor around. The screen showed a 3D skeleton infrastructure of the massive 5-star resort. In real time, the monitor depicted structures of the building, beams, girders, joists, ballasts, and so forth, crumbling and dissipating into particles. The Midpoint Hotel was turning into dust right beneath them all. Sully stared at the screen and then looked at the Time Lord. Mr. Blue wasn't smiling anymore.
"This hotel is falling apart, understand? Why?"
"It's not falling apart," the Time Lord answered. "Looks like it to me," Dawn yelled. "Feels like it." Pete latched onto his big sister. Mr. Blue shook his head. "No, this building is being dismantled." The Commodore coughed.
"Dear God, man. Why? Is someone doing this on purpose? Do they know anyone's here?"
"Good question." The Time Lord pressed a button. Pierre Gonzalez was almost packed up and headed to leave for this horrendous 10-plus hour shift he had just completed. He'd watched, slowly, over the last eon of his shift, as the huge call center slowly went from busy hive with over 250 workers to 100, to 50, to 10, to 5, to him. It was never like this. In all his 7 years as a communications manager for the Midpoint, every single guest in the damned mid-pain-in-the-ass hotel had become violently ill. The ritzy fishbowl in space, as Pierre thought of it, now under quarantine. He sighed to himself as he grabbed his satchel, thinking that the ordeal was over. About to leave, last one there, and Pierre Gonzalez got a call. Ethically, he was bound to take the emergency response alert device. Pierre didn't want to, but he had to. Last one there, about to leave. He thought of many unsavory words in his mind, but the most often used was damn it. Every other word was much worse.
Send back up the left!
A bizarre man with platinum blonde hair and strange blue eyes was demanding over the Visicom.
Oh, hello. I am Pierre Gonzalez. Where are you calling from? The Midpoint. Where else? That is impossible, sir. The Midpoint is currently under quarantine. The meta platform has been withdrawn.
Mr. Blue shook his head.
I am here with two very frightened young children, the Rothlanders.
Pierre Gonzalez shook his head.
The Rothlanders party was evacuated. 2 accounted for. That's great, but you see, there's 2 more. It's been a long day. I know you jackasses down in infrastructure want to screw with the manager, but I'm done with this. I'm out. At least open the main shuttles to the surface, the Time Lord urged. No, I can't help you out. Don't you end this call?
Pierre Gonzalez pressed a button.
Sorry. You'll be sorry,
Mr. Blue shouted to the now unresponsive monitor.
Well, you sure told him,
Sully observed. Dawn giggled. The Time Lord leered at the Commodore.
The one that got away from me admitted, I am a bit under pressure here.
As if on cue, the Midpoint shuddered. Not a tremendous quake. Enough to get the attention of Sully, the Time Lord, and the kids.
How bad is it getting?
Sully asked. Mr. Blue was checking the screen.
Not great. If only I could understand what is taking this place apart.
It's probably the rapids, Pete said, wiping a cheek.
The rapids?
Mr. Blue repeated.
Yeah, they're little robots that built the hotel. Duh. They're called rapids.
Dawn explained. She seemed frustrated by the task, impatient, as if this should be common knowledge. Or perhaps she was scared. Or an 11-year-old girl.
Never heard of such a thing.
Sully placed his hands on his hips. The Time Lord in the cobalt suit adjusted his tie as he knelt.
You won't have to. It's 2367, Sully. Oh. Well, I suppose that explains that then.
Mr. Blue returned his attention to the children.
Now, do me a favor, kids. And believe me when I tell you this could be extremely important. Tell me everything about the rapids.